We are live. You already know who it is. My name is Mike Kyle, aka the Fantasy Vulture. I have over a decade worth of fantasy football experience, and I've continuously competed for fantasy championships over the course of the past 6 seasons. Let's make it 7 in 2020. But enough of me. I'm here for you. On today's episode of the FB Show, we are here. Like fucking finally. The NFL season is upon us tonight with the Houston Texans at the defending Super Bowl champions, the Kansas City Chiefs. And today we are going to dive into our Thursday night kickoff preview. But before we get started with that, a few quick things from you. First off, smash that subscribe button, power running back style, so that you never miss a video from me. Also hit that like button down below, like an open receiver downfield, Patrick Mahomes style. And if you're listening to the podcast, be sure to drop us a review over there as well. And finally, you can follow me on all social media platforms at FFVulture. That is TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. The Twitter is blowing up right now. A lot of good conversations happening, not only on the timeline, but in the DMs as well. I got a lot of people reaching out to me for like keepers or just lineup decisions, trades. I've been getting a lot of trade requests, so all of those interactions have been really fun. So if you've been one of those people, shout out to you, because I appreciate all of your feedback and, interacting with me wherever you can. But the season is here, and it's time to talk about the Thursday night preview. But before we do that, I want to talk about something else. It's kind of like the opening segment, so that way this video isn't just like 10 minutes long, because we are only covering one game. So I really posed this question because I was a bit conflicted. So I hop on the old Twitter machine, as I tend to do in my free time, and I ask, hey, do you find weekly rankings helpful? How much do you use them? Just do they help your overall fantasy outlook? And if you don't know what weekly rankings are, just kind of give you the quick rundown. They are basically extensive lists of every single position, and they rank which player is likely to finish ahead of another. So a great use for this would be start sit. Let's say you have Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods. Now, why you would have both, I don't know. But maybe that is the draft strategy that you decided to take because you love the Rams. And so you don't know which one to play because you don't want to play both guys. Let's say one guy fell to you in like the 5th round and you drafted Cooper Kupp in the 3rd. What you would use these rankings for is to see, all right, what player would you be happier starting? What player has the higher chance of scoring fantasy points, essentially? So these lists are pretty extensive for every single position. Like for quarterbacks, you've got to rank all 30 quarterbacks. And the running backs, you're probably ranking 50. For wide receivers, you're ranking 60 to 70. And I really thought about bringing that to Fantasy Vulture. And the reason why was just simply because it's like an industry standard thing to do. But for me, I don't like weekly rankings. And the reason why is this, and I've talked about this a bit before, but I really want to just spend these quick few moments in the early part of the video to elaborate on it. Fantasy football is a game of nuance and context. You can't just look at a sheet and say, oh, I'm going to start player A over player B because this sheet told me to. It's the same, like, the only reason why it is slightly different with draft strategy is because there are ways to work around it, and you're able to kind of project a season-long outlook better than you are a week-to-week outlook, just based on a variety of different factors. It's a little bit easier. And with drafting specifically, when you are in your draft, like, you have to make these decisions because they're going to impact the overall course of your team, right? And that's obviously, you don't win your league at the draft, even though I kind of think you do. But you can definitely, fuck up and make mistakes at your draft. So that's why draft prep and draft strategy is so important. But when it comes to week-to-week, week-to-week rankings lack the context necessary. Fantasy football is a game won in nuance. There's so much that goes into what your weekly lineup is every single week. It's things like, all right, what's the matchup? Who are your options? What's your roster construction look like? What's your opponent doing? Are there ways that you can kind of manipulate your matchup against your opponent to get a better outcome? These are all things that go into how I decide who I'm starting and sitting every single week. And there's no way for me to properly elaborate on that in just a standard list of rankings. So I was literally sitting here at the computer, and my cousin was over. He was watching me over my shoulder. and I'd do a list of like 10 names, and I'd look at it, and I'd be like, meh, and then I'd delete everything. And then I'd punch in a new set of 10 names to just try and work different ways, just trying to figure out how I want to do it. And it's just like, I don't believe in this. I don't believe in weekly rankings. It's not, in a pinch they work. If you just need a quick piece of advice, weekly rankings work. But for me, context matters so much. And the example that I have written down here in my notes is, it's not just starting Stephon Diggs over Keenan Allen, right? Those are two guys that you could very easily have on your fantasy team. But those two players have two totally different play styles. So if you're facing an opponent where your opponent just has a very, very standard team, and all you need to do is put up points on the board and you'll be okay. Like, you don't have to do anything extreme, just a high floor. Keenan Allen's your start. However, on the other side of it, if you're facing your league's juggernaut, and you need a swing for the fences play, a guy that can get you 25 points on any given week, and while it might blow back in your face, there's a chance it does, but you need that high upside play, in that situation, you're starting Stephon Diggs over Keenan Allen. So it's not just cut and dry. Like, it's not, you can't simplify fantasy football into a list. You just can't. There's so much more that goes into it. So instead, after talking it over with Evan, good friend of the program, after talking it over with him, like, we just kind of decided, and I say we because like he's like my right hand man. So I was just like, dude, I'm doing these rankings, but like that we don't use them. Like, so why would I want to spend the time and energy to try and do that? And he's just like, well, let's just try and break it down differently. What if we did like 3 sneaky starts, 3 swing for the fences, and 3 safe plays? And I was like, that makes a ton of sense. So that's going to be coming tomorrow or on Saturday's show. I don't know what the title of that segment's going to be called or if I'm even going to name it. But basically that is how I'm going to do my rankings, because it's not going to be traditional. It is just going to be very segmented. And hey, here's a few list of guys that you can start, and if you're in this position, a few different plays that you can start if you're in this position, and a third set if you need a quick start based upon this matchup. So I'm really excited for that because that more so fits the way that I approach fantasy football. But now for the content that you guys are all actually here for, instead of hearing me rambling about why I hate rankings so much. So, season's here, Thursday night. We've waited all year long for it, and that is the Houston Texans at the Kansas City Chiefs in Arrowhead. Let's go over some quick game notes before we go into who you're starting, who you're sitting, and some of the outlooks for each players. So, as we all know, the Chiefs are coming off of a Super Bowl victory. Last year's playoffs, just a reminder, these two teams met in the AFC divisional game, and Houston was putting a throbbing all over the Chiefs, and they were up 24-0 at one point. And what did Kansas City do? They rallied. Pat Mahomes emerged from what appeared to be the dead. Mahomes emerges from the dead, and he lights up the board with not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, but 6 touchdowns in just an absolute massacre towards the second half of that game. It was one of the most electrifying performances I've ever seen, and it's one of those things where like you forget because everything feels like it's been a decade ago. That happened this year. This year, the Texans were burying the Chiefs, and the Chiefs stormed back. So what happens now? Guess we'll find out. Another note. Defending champions. This is just this is just something that you might not think about, but I was really interested in seeing what the stats were in this. Defending champions are 13-6-1 against the spread, coming off of a Super Bowl victory in Week 1. And the reason why I felt like that was important, because a lot of times you may hear things like a championship hangover, and that's really just what happens after you hit the top, after you are now coming down from your last. First off, from your last game, really. But more so, you just had this incredible season where you won a championship, and now what happens the year following. So that's why I thought diving into that data and really seeing how that played out was really important to me. So now I can see like, oh, hey, maybe that supposed championship hangover isn't really a real thing, because it looks like championship teams play pretty well the following year, at least to start the season. Also, an injury note here. Brandin Cooks has been limited throughout the course of the past few days. I was about to say week, but yes, that also makes the same thing. So Brandin Cooks has a quad injury. He was limited in practice on Wednesday. And I think he's a question. To me, he's listed as questionable. I think Cooks is going to be a game time decision. Obviously, this is going to come out a little bit beforehand. I'm pretty much recording everything the night before. So at this moment, it is Wednesday at 8:50. Maybe I should say that before every single video, what time I'm recording it. So that way, if there's any information that comes out afterwards, you guys know that I'm not just skipping it. I simply just don't have it at the time of recording. So Cooks is questionable, limited in practice all week with a quad injury. Mike Evans is actually currently listed on the injury report for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as well. A lot of guys just popping up with different soft tissue injuries. It's going to be a theme, I think, during 2020. So those are the quick game notes and just things that you kind of need to keep in mind as you start to approach your fantasy football lineup for this week. Awesome. All right, let's dive into the start-sit of this game. Kansas City auto starts. I'm just going to kind of, the way that we're going to do this is we're really just going to move through the rosters and answer the questions that we need to, but I don't really want to spend a whole lot of time talking about guys that you're automatically starting because honestly, I got other things to do. I got 14 other games I need to break down and get notes down for. So let's go. Kansas City starts sit. Kansas City auto starts. You're starting Mahomes. You're starting Clyde Edward Helaire, the rookie. I think he's going like this. If Clyde Edward Helaire comes out and lights the Texans on fire, which I'm not going to rule out. Are we really, do you remember what Kareem Hunt did week 1? He fumbled. The footballers reminded me of this. Kareem Hunt fumbles week 1, but then in the same game scores 3 other touchdowns. He was unbelievable. I think I was actually facing Kareem Hunt that game as well. His first game versus the Patriots. So Kareem Hunt lights up the NFL week 1 Thursday night game to start the season. And there's a chance that I feel like we get that with Clyde Edward Helaire. So I'm really excited to see what the rookie looks like in Kansas City, at least for this week. You're auto starting Tyreek Hill and you're auto starting Travis Kelce. I don't need to really talk about those two guys at all. For the Texans, on the other side of the ball for Houston, you're starting Deshaun Watson. To me, I think it kind of ends there with Houston's auto starts. And that's a little bit wild for me to say. I also have in my notes here, you're likely starting David Johnson, and the reason why I put likely there is because if you started off with 3 running backs, there's a chance that David Johnson is your third guy because you got him in that 3rd, 4th, 5th round area, and so you won't necessarily have to rely on him. David Johnson, though, great flex play. I'm just saying, if you're more prone to starting off a wide receiver in your flex, that's kind of where I have that likely caveat. If David Johnson's your number 2 running back, you're starting him, no questions asked. I'm just saying if you have another really good option that you can put in your flex, I think that's where it gets a little bit tricky. Are you starting David Johnson? Are you not? For example, my cousin has Kenyon Drake in his flex, his running. This was the league that I helped him draft a little bit, and it was his first. I think his first set of picks were. Who did we start with? We went Clyde, Sanders, Drake, David Johnson. So David Johnson's actually his 4th running back. And I don't know if he's going to start him this week against Kansas City. It makes sense if you do, though, right? This is going to be, I didn't even mention this. The over-under for this game is 54.5. That's a shit ton of points. So if that is the case, then, we can even play this a step further. Let's say Kansas City jumps out to a huge lead. David Johnson's going to be involved in the passing game, and in a half-point PPR format, that's obviously going to boost his floor even more. So I say likely starting David Johnson. I cannot talk. So you're likely starting DJ, and it's just a matter of this game could be absolutely electric. You have the opportunity to get points on the board with the running back position. Remember, #running backs win you championships. And so it's just one of the things, start David Johnson. I'll say it. I'm gonna remove that likely starting to auto start. I'm gonna make a note of that right now. AS auto start. Okay. So that we need to move on now to the biggest question I have about this game. And that is, very simply, what the fuck do you do with Will Fuller? I don't know. I've had one person asked me 2 different Will Fuller questions, and I've given him different answers for each one. And granted, it's 2 different leagues where he has Will Fuller in both. So, but I did the question was in a half-point format: do you start Will Fuller or Kerryon? And I told him start Kerryon. And I lied. It was half point, Will Fuller or Kerryon. I told him to start Will Fuller. The other question in standard was Will Fuller or Mark Ingram, and I said you start Mark Ingram. So that to me is one of the examples of why weekly rankings are useless, because there's so much context that is needed to make each individual decision. So what the fuck do you do with Will Fuller? I'll say this. If Brandin Cooks does not play, we mentioned, as I just said, he's been limited all week in practice with a quad injury. If, for whatever reason, Brandin Cooks does not play, I think I would find it nearly impossible to sit Will Fuller. We don't know what this Houston Texans passing game is going to look like without DeAndre Hopkins, who just traditionally had a 25% target share. What happens now between we will remove Brandin Cooks from the situation. So what happens with Will Fuller, Kenny Stills, and Randall Cobb? What does that passing breakdown look like? I don't know. Again, this game is likely designed to be a shootout, to where we are going to get, both teams could easily put up 30 in this game. So, I don't know what to do. And I'm going to elaborate on this point even further here. This is Will Fuller's game log last season during the first 6 weeks. And this is why I have hesitancy starting Will Fuller automatically. I own Will Fuller in standard. He is my 5th wide receiver. I don't think I'm going to play him. Week 1 last year versus New Orleans. First off, we need to look at the snap counts. Everything is above 90%, and it's pretty much 100% of the snaps. 3 targets, 7 targets, 7 targets, 6, 16, 9. The big game here, obviously, that 45-point performance versus Atlanta, but everything besides that was an absolute letdown. I went back and I just looked at the numbers. Will Fuller, through the first 4 weeks of last season, was wide receiver 66. Again, this offense is changing because of the fact that you don't have DeAndre Hopkins. But how confident are you in starting Will Fuller during this matchup on a Thursday night nonetheless? And the reason why I use Thursday night here, I'm going to talk about this a lot throughout the course of the season. When I'm setting my lineups every single week, I look at what time my games are at and what days. Because I know that if we go into Thursday, I can do one of 2 things. I can then enter Sunday, down a player entirely because I just wasted a Thursday night spot, or I can be up a position because I had a Thursday night guy and I'm already ahead of the curve because let's say he put up 20 points and I'm already up 20 going into Sunday. Now, does that matter because points are points? Sure. But something that I find this very, very relatable to is actually what Worldwide Wob was talking about during his NBA live stream after the Lakers-Rockets game the other night. And he was saying, you can't convince me that 2 points in the first quarter are the same thing as 2 points in the fourth. And that's basically how I view scheduling and matchups when it comes down to fantasy. Yes, points are points, but to me, for whatever reason, it processes differently depending on when and how you score the points. I'll probably talk about that in a future video. So I just have a lot of hesitancy. Even so, let's look at, they played Kansas City. You're actually looking at Will Fuller's game log, unironically, at Kansas City, which is the exact same thing that we're getting right here. 88% of snaps, 6.9 points, 9 targets, 5 catches, 44 yards. That's not what you need from your starting wide receiver or your flex option. Hint, don't play him at your flex. I'll talk about this in a little bit. I just have concerns. And all of that said, you are likely not required to start Will Fuller based upon where you drafted him. He was going in that 7th, 8th, 9th round territory, which means that you probably have at least 3 other wide receivers ahead of Fuller on your team where you aren't going to rely on him every single week, and that's probably a good thing. But Will Fuller is my first ever smash play on Fantasy Vulture. As I just talked about, the way that I'm going to approach my rankings we're not doing rankings. We're doing 3 sneaky starts, 3 swing for the fences and 3 safe options. Will Fuller is my first swing for the fence play. If you are unfortunately facing your league's juggernaut week 1, and you feel like you have to start off on the right foot this season, I think that's the situation where you start Will Fuller, because we know what Will Fuller can do. It's just a matter of, will he do it or not? Again, we're looking at the game log right now. That's currently where I'm at. And fortunately for me, I don't feel like I'm at that situation during my current matchup. But the thoughts there, that's the thing. Starting Will Fuller this week feels like a sexy thing to do, but I feel like it's gonna turn out to be a striptease more than anything, if we're gonna be honest. And that is just unfortunately how I see this situation shaking out. On the other side of the ball, on the other side of the Texans offense, rather, if Brandin Cooks is active, I'm likely not starting him. The scoring upside is there, as I just mentioned with Will Fuller. This game is designed to be a shootout. It's going to be high scoring, and that's what we love. I love that this is the first game that we get to start off the season after such a prolonged offseason. But because Cooks has already been limited in practice all week, I feel like he might just be used as a decoy if he is out there. We don't really know if he's going to get the full run. Maybe he is on a snap count. I'm not starting Brandin Cooks at all if he's active. It's just one of those things where, again, I want to come out on top week 1. I talked about this in my how to guarantee you make the playoffs. You pretty much get 4 losses throughout the season. You need to win 9 games. I don't want to sacrifice a loss week 1 if I can control it, right? Obviously, we want to win every single game, but there are things that you can do to kind of minimize risks, to minimize risk, and I feel like starting Brandin Cooks is definitely the wrong thing to do to start off your fantasy season. But I think that's it. If my dog could start barking, that would be greatly appreciated. I don't know if you guys can hear that. But that's going to do it for our Thursday night preview. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I'm still trying to figure out the format for what this is going to look like moving forward. I'm really excited, though. I have a lot of ideas. Sunday nights and Monday mornings, the content that I have in mind. Granted, time is a thing, and time is limited. But if I can pull off what I think I want to, oh, baby, the Fantasy Vulture is going to be an absolute blast. So I encourage all of you guys to subscribe. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like. If you're listening to the podcast, drop us a review. And last but not least, you can actually check out the website, ffvulture.com. I'm actually going to take all of my show notes here and transcribe everything over there. So if you just need that quick little recap as to something I said, instead of having to go back through and find the clip or the point where I said it, everything is going to be there for you. So once again, thank you so much for watching. You can follow me on all social media platforms at ffvulture. And remember, people come and go, but fantasy championships are forever. I will see you on Saturday with our week 1 previews. Later.